Really, really great watch and a favorite of mine. Lastly, I'm going to touch on Nautilus 7118 1A. So this is supposedly a ladies line, but really it's a mid-size. We've seen this watch more recently in rose gold, but in the steel execution, you've got so many of the design points from the reference 5711, which is the sort of the most well-known Nautilus. But you've got an interesting grayscale fume wave dial, which I think is really, really interesting. I suppose Patek tried to separate this from the standard Nautilus to give it a sort of feminine finish, but I don't think it really works. I don't see this as any more feminine than the 5711. If this was pitched as a 3800 or a 5800 successor, it would have been so much more successful, but instead it's pitched as a 7 series reference. But really, if you take all of those numbers away, you're left with a watch that's brilliantly versatile, monochromatic, as I say, with a really interesting dial that is sort of black and white in one light, and then like a hologram, if you flick it across, you can almost see these brownish tones as well. It's a brilliant watch, and I think represents really great value for exactly the reasons I've been talking about. The last monochrome watch I'm going to talk about, I promise, is this fantastic example of a sea dweller, reference 1665. I've never seen one in this condition before. It's a great white, but it's also a rail dial, which was a reference that was produced in the 70s, only for a year or so. A couple of the things that I really like about this specific model is that you have the perfect patina on the bezel, and you also have the original date disc, which rather than being black and white is silver and white. Really, it doesn't come across in photos, but when you see it and the way that it reflects light, it's an incredible thing. I've never seen one before in this condition with that date disc. One of the things that I really especially love about this reference is that these days of 40mm cases in the Sea Dweller have long gone. Now we're talking about much more robust and big watches like the Deep Sea, and also just the standard Sea Dweller is a much larger case size. But this shares the same two-dimensional proportions as the Submariner, with only a slightly larger case to compensate for that additional waterproofness. You've also got that lovely integrated helium escape valve on the side of the case, which is something that's so subtly done when you compare it with an Omega Seamaster or something with that big rotating escape valve. I don't know, I don't understand why that they did that, but Rolex got it right with this watch. Really subtle, really interesting detail. And as I say, vintage proportions win out every time. I envy anyone that picks it up before I do. It's a lovely, lovely watch, and finishes off that monochrome theme really nicely.